The colony ship Harmony was the largest vessel humanity had ever built for peace. It stretched across the darkness of space like a floating city, carrying 12,000 souls toward a future filled with hope. Families walked through its wide corridors. Children played in observation rooms where massive windows showed the endless stars. Scientists discussed their research while sharing meals in crowded cafeterias. Artists painted murals on the walls to celebrate this historic journey. Admiral Kira Vasquez stood on the bridge of her warship, the Resolute, watching the Harmony through her viewport. Her vessel was small compared to the colony ship, built for combat rather than comfort. But today she felt more like a ceremonial guard than a military commander. This was supposed to be a mission of friendship, not war. Humanity had joined the Galactic Concord only 5 years ago. They were newcomers to a community of ancient civilizations that had traveled between stars for thousands of years. Many species had doubted whether humans were ready. Some said humans were too aggressive. Others said they were too primitive. But the Valrai, one of the oldest races in the galaxy, had spoken in humanity's favor. They saw potential in these young beings from Earth. The Harmony was proof of that potential. It carried diplomats, researchers, teachers, and ordinary families to establish the first joint human-Valar research station. This would be a place where two species would work together, learn from each other, and build something greater than either could achieve alone. Captain Marcus Chen commanded the Harmony with quiet confidence. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen both the best and worst of humanity. For this mission, he had handpicked his crew from thousands of volunteers. Everyone aboard believed in what they were doing, in the diplomatic section of the ship. Ambassador Thomas Okonkwo reviewed his notes for the 100th time. He was a large man, with a warm smile and a voice that could calm any argument. For 20 years, he had worked to bring humanity into the galactic community. This mission was his greatest achievement. His wife and young daughter had joined him for the journey, wanting to witness history being made. Lieutenant Priya Sharma served as communications officer aboard the Resolute. She was young, barely 25 years old, with sharp eyes and quick hands. This was her first deep space assignment, and she felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. Every message that passed through her station could shape the future of human-alien relations. The convoy traveled through normal space toward the Cythera corridor, a demilitarized zone protected by Concord law. No weapons were allowed to fire within its boundaries. No acts of war could take place there. It was considered the safest route in the galaxy, guaranteed by treaties that had stood for centuries. Admiral Seas allowed herself to relax slightly as they entered the corridor. Her two escort frigates, the Vigilant and the Defender, maintained formation around the Harmony. Together, they represented humanity's commitment to protecting what mattered most. But truly, she expected nothing more dangerous than a quiet journey on the Harmony. Life continued with joy and anticipation. A group of children had gathered in the main observation deck to watch the stars. Their teacher, a young woman named Sarah, pointed out different constellations and explained where they were going. The children asked endless questions about the Valori. Would they be friendly? What did they look like? Could humans and Valori become friends? Sarah smiled and told them yes. The Valori were known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and kindness. They had welcomed humanity with open arms when others had turned away. This mission would prove that trust was not misplaced. In the medical bay, Dr. James Wright checked his supplies for the 10th time. He was responsible for the health of everyone aboard, and he took that duty seriously. His staff of 30 worked around the clock to ensure that the journey remained safe and comfortable. They had prepared for every emergency they could imagine. Ambassador Okonkwo walked through the ship, speaking with families and crew members alike. He wanted everyone to understand the importance of what they were doing. They were not just traveling to another star system. They were building a bridge between worlds. Every person aboard was an ambassador in their own way. His daughter, a bright girl of 7 named Adaze, held his hand as they walked. She asked her father why some aliens did not like humans. Okonkwo knelt down to look into her eyes. He explained that fear of the unknown was natural. Some beings feared what they did not understand. But the best way to fight fear was with friendship. That was why they were making this journey. Back on the Resolute, Lieutenant Sharma noticed something strange on her sensors. There were unusual energy readings near the edge of the corridor. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the data stream. She reported the anomaly to Admiral Vasquez. The Admiral studied the readings with a frown. They could be natural phenomena, echoes from distant stars, or simply glitches in the equipment. The Sethera corridor was supposed to be safe. No hostile force would dare violate Concord law in such a protected zone. She ordered increased sensor sweeps but did not raise the alarm. There was no point in frightening 12,000 civilians over readings that were probably nothing. The convoy continued its journey, unaware that death was watching from the shadows. Captain Chen received the sensor, report on the Harmony, but shared the Admiral's assessment. He had traveled through this corridor many times during his career. Nothing had ever threatened him here. He returned his attention to the celebration happening in the main hall, where humans from every nation on Earth gathered to sing songs and share stories. The children in the observation deck pressed their faces against the windows, watching stars drift past like diamonds scattered on black velvet. They dreamed of the adventures waiting for them. They imagined meeting Valori children and learning alien games. They had no way of knowing that some of them would never see another sunrise. Lieutenant Sharma watched her screens with growing unease. The strange readings had returned, stronger now and closer. She opened her mouth to report again when space itself seemed to tear apart. 3 massive warships appeared from nowhere, their hulls dark as death and their weapons already glowing with deadly energy. They had been hiding, cloaked, and waiting. Like predators stalking prey, the Krethver had come for humanity. Admiral Vasquez had only seconds to react before the first shots were fired. Alarms screamed across all 4 human ships. On the Harmony, 12,000 voices cried out in confusion and terror. The golden age of hope had ended. The age of fire had begun. End of Part 1. Show compassion. The human admiral smiled. That ship died with our civilians. Part 2. The first blast struck the Vigilant before anyone could react. The small frigate broke apart in a flash of fire and metal, killing everyone aboard in an instant. 200 souls vanished from existence between one heartbeat and the next. Admiral Kira Vasquez shouted orders across the bridge of the Resolute. Her crew scrambled to battle stations, but they had been caught completely unprepared. The Krethvar warships were 3 times the size of her remaining vessels. Their weapons were already charged and firing, so while human gunners were still reaching for their controls, the Defender moved to intercept, placing itself between the attackers and the Harmony. Captain Rodriguez knew his ship could not survive, but he hoped to buy time. He managed to fire 2 volleys before a Krethvar beam cut his vessel in half. Another 200 humans died in flames. On the Harmony, chaos ruled. Alarms echoed through every corridor. Parents grabbed their children and ran without knowing where to go. The ship was never designed for combat. Its hull was thin, its shields were weak, it carried no weapons at all. Captain Marcus Chen stood at his station with forced calm. He ordered an emergency jump calculation, knowing it would take precious minutes they might not have. His navigation officer worked frantically while the ship shook from distant explosions. Admiral Vasquez pushed the Resolute forward, desperate to protect the civilians behind her. Her weapons officer fired everything they had at the lead Krethvar vessel. The shots splashed against heavy shields without causing any damage. It was like throwing stones at a mountain. Lieutenant Priya Sharma sent distress signals on every frequency. She begged for help from anyone who might hear, but the nearest Concord patrol was hours away. No one was coming to save them. The Krethvar did not respond to any communications. They did not demand surrender. They did not issue warnings. They simply fired again and again with cold precision. Their target was clear from the beginning. They wanted the Harmony dead. A massive blast struck the colony ship's engine section. The jump drive exploded in a cascade of energy that rippled through the vessel. Now they could not run, even if they survived the attack. Captain Chen ordered all civilians to escape pods. It was their only chance. Thousands of people rushed through corridors, pushing and stumbling in their terror. Crew members tried to maintain order. Panic had taken hold. Ambassador Thomas Okonkwo held his wife and daughter close as they ran toward the nearest pod bay. Adeus was crying, asking what was happening, asking why the bad aliens wanted to hurt them. Her father had no answer that a 7-year-old could understand. The first escape pods launched into space, tiny vessels, carrying handfuls of desperate people. For a moment, hope flickered in the hearts of those still aboard. Perhaps they could escape. Perhaps the Krethver would let the pods go. Then the Krethver began shooting the pods, one by one. The small craft vanished in bursts of fire. Families who had reached safety were killed anyway. Children who thought they had escaped died screaming in the cold vacuum. The Krethver were not interested in prisoners or survivors. They wanted extinction. Admiral Vasquez watched the massacre through tear-filled eyes. Her ship was burning. Half her crew was dead. And she could do nothing but witness as thousands of innocent people were slaughtered. Ambassador Okonkwo reached a communication panel and broadcast a message to the attackers. His voice was steady despite the terror around him. He pleaded for mercy. He offered himself as a hostage. He reminded them that the Concord forbade attacks on civilians. He spoke of peace and understanding and the better nature that existed in all thinking beings. His message cut off mid-sentence when a Krethver beam struck that section of the ship, Captain. Chen saw the death of his friend on the monitors. Something broke inside him. He looked at the enemy vessels with cold determination. The Harmony was dying. Most of his passengers were already dead. But he could still do one thing. He ordered all surviving crew to abandon ship, then took the helm himself. With trembling hands, he turned the massive colony ship toward the lead Krethver warship. The engines were damaged but not destroyed. He could still move. The Harmony accelerated on a collision course. Warning alarms filled the Krethver bridge. They had not expected this. Their weapons fired desperately at the incoming vessel, tearing holes in the hull, but the ship kept coming. At the last moment, the Krethvar commander ordered evasive action. His ship turned aside just enough to avoid a direct hit. The Harmony scraped along its shields and hull, causing damage but not destruction. But Chen had bought something precious. In the chaos of his final attack, over 200 escape pods managed to launch and scatter before the Krethver could track them all. 200 people out of 12,000 would survive because of his sacrifice. The Harmony exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the darkness of space. On the Resolute, Lieutenant Sharma pulled Admiral Vasquez from her command chair. The Admiral was badly wounded, her side torn open by shrapnel, her face covered in blood. She tried to refuse evacuation, tried to stay and fight. But Sharma was stronger in that moment. The young lieutenant dragged her commander to an escape pod and launched it into space. Behind them, the Resolute fought on for another few minutes before it, too, was destroyed. Vasquez and Sharma drifted among the wreckage, their tiny pod invisible among so much debris. Through the small window, they could see what remained of their convoy. Twisted metal, frozen bodies, and the scattered remnants of dreams floated past them in silence. The Krethvar warships moved through the debris field, hunting for survivors. They found some pods and destroyed them. Others they missed in the chaos. The attackers were thorough, but not perfect. Lieutenant Sharma worked the pod's communication system with shaking hands. She picked up Krethvert transmissions and played them through the speaker. The voices of the enemy filled the tiny space. They were laughing, the Krethver. Commanders joked about the weakness of humans. They mocked the pleas for mercy. They congratulated each other on a successful hunt. To them, 12,000 deaths were a celebration. Admiral Vasquez listened in silence. Her eyes were open but empty, fixed on a point beyond the walls of the pod, beyond space itself. Something inside her had changed. The woman who believed in diplomacy and peace had died with her people. Rescue ships arrived 6 hours later. Concord patrol vessels finally reached the Sethera corridor to find a graveyard where a convoy had been. They pulled survivors from scattered pods, counting them one by one. 218 humans had survived the massacre. 12,000 had died. When they found Admiral Vasquez, she was still conscious. She had refused to let Sharma treat her wounds until others were saved first. Her face was pale from blood loss, but her eyes burned with something that made the rescue teams look away. She did not cry. She did not speak. She simply watched as her people counted their dead. The galaxy had taught humanity a terrible lesson. Now humanity would teach one in return. End of Part 2. Show compassion? The human admiral smiled. That ship died with our civilians. Part 3. 6 months passed since the massacre in the Sethera corridor. The galaxy had moved on to other concerns. Trade disputes needed resolution. Border conflicts required attention. 12,000 human deaths had become just another tragic footnote in the long history of space. But humanity had not moved on. Humanity would never move on. On Earth, monuments rose from the ground in every major city. Granite walls stretched toward the sky covered with names. 12,000 names carved with precision and care. Each letter represented a life cut short, a story ended too soon, a future that would never be. Children learned these names in schools. Teachers spoke of the harmony and its passengers with quiet voices. They told stories of Ambassador Okonkwo, who died pleading for peace. They spoke of Captain Chen, who sacrificed himself to save 200 souls. They described the children who had pressed their faces against windows, dreaming of friendship with aliens. Humanity remembered. That was what made them different from other species. They did not forget their dead. They did not let time wash away the memory of those they had lost. Every name became a wound that would never fully heal. The Galactic Concord had responded to the massacre with words. Many words. Speeches of condemnation echoed through the halls of power. Diplomats expressed their sincere regret. Resolutions were passed declaring the attack a violation of sacred law, but words were all they offered. The Krethver. Government claimed that the attack was carried out by a rogue faction. Extremists who acted without authorization. They expressed their own regret and offered symbolic compensation. A small payment for each life lost, as if human souls could be measured in credits. Other species urged humanity to accept this explanation. War was expensive. Conflict disrupted trade. The Krethvor were powerful members of the Concord, and challenging them would cause instability. It was better for everyone if this unfortunate incident was put behind them. Human diplomats listened to this advice in cold silence. They looked at their alien counterparts with eyes that revealed nothing. Then they returned to Earth and reported what they had heard. The response was universal. From the crowded cities of Asia to the quiet towns of Europe. From the vast plains of Africa to the mountains of America, humanity spoke with one voice. They would not accept lies. They would not forget their dead. They would not pretend that 12,000 murders could be balanced with money and empty apologies. Admiral Kira Vasquez had spent 3 months in medical care, recovering from her wounds. The doctors had saved her body, but her spirit had transformed into something harder and colder. She walked with a slight limp now. It's a permanent reminder of what she had lost. When she was released from the hospital, she found herself promoted. The United Nations Space Command had created a new position just for her. She would lead a fleet unlike any humanity had built before. For years, human scientists had theorized about advanced technologies. Faster engines, better weapons, superior shields. They had lacked the resources and motivation to turn theories into reality. Now they had both in secret shipyards hidden throughout the solar system, workers labored day and night. They built warships designed for a single purpose. They created weapons that would make the Krethvar tremble. They developed engines that could cross vast distances in the blink of an eye. The galaxy believed humans were decades away from military significance. The galaxy was wrong. Admiral Vasquez spent her days training crews and studying intelligence reports. Human agents had infiltrated Krethvar space, gathering information about the massacre. They wanted names. They wanted locations. They wanted to know exactly who had given the orders and who had pulled the triggers. What they discovered destroyed the lie of the rogue faction. The attack had been planned at the highest levels of Krethvar military command. Admiral Threxnell, one of their most decorated officers, had personally led the assault. His orders came from generals who reported directly to the Krethvar ruling council. This was not the action of extremists. This was state-sanctioned genocide. Lieutenant Priya Sharma was promoted to captain for her actions during the massacre, served as Admiral Vasquez's second-in-command. She had changed too in the past 6 months. The eager young officer who had dreamed a peaceful exploration, now trained for war with grim determination. Together, they reviewed the intelligence files. They memorized the faces of every Krethvar officer involved in the attack. They learned the names of every ship that had fired on the Harmony. They built a list of those responsible, from the admirals who gave orders to the gunners who destroyed escape pods. Human ambassadors formally withdrew from Concord arbitration. They announced that humanity would seek justice through its own means. The alien diplomats were confused. What could humans possibly do? Their fleet was tiny. Their technology was primitive. This was surely just an empty gesture to satisfy their angry population. Then humanity declared war. Not a general war against all Krethvar, not a campaign of conquest or destruction. They declared war specifically against the Krethvar military command structure responsible for the massacre. They named Admiral Threxnell and 17 other officers as war criminals. They demanded their surrender to face trial on Earth. The Krethvar laughed at this demand. They controlled one of the largest fleets in the galaxy. Humanity was a minor species with a handful of ships. The idea that humans could threaten them was absurd. Admiral Vasquez watched the Krethvar response with a cold smile. Let them laugh. Let them feel safe in their arrogance. It would make what came next even more satisfying. The new human fleet gathered in orbit around Luna. 12 warships, each one named for a month of the Earth year. They were smaller than Krethvar vessels, but faster and more advanced. They carried weapons that had never been tested in combat and engines that broke the known laws of physics. Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the January around her. Crew members worked with silent efficiency. They were volunteers, every one of them. Many had lost family in the massacre. All had lost faith in the galaxy's promise of justice. She addressed her fleet through the communication system. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying across 12 ships and thousands of dedicated souls. They were not going to war for revenge, she told them. Revenge was emotion, and emotion led to mistakes. They were going to war for justice. They would find those responsible and bring them to face judgment. They would show the galaxy that human lives had value. They would teach the Krethvar that some prices were too high to pay. The fleet jumped too faster than light speed. It's vanishing from human space in a flash of distorted light. The hunt had begun. End of Part 3. Show compassion. The human admiral smiled. That ship died with our civilians. Part for the first strike came without warning. A Krethvar military outpost on the edge of their territory simply went silent. When patrol ships arrived to investigate, they found the base destroyed. Every weapon system had been disabled. Every ship in the docking bay had been reduced to wreckage. But the Krethvar soldiers stationed there were alive. Confused and frightened, but alive. All except Commander Vethric, who had served as weapons officer during the massacre. He was gone, taken by forces that had appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The Krethvar High Command received their first human message 3 days later. Commander Vethrak had been delivered to Earth, where he awaited trial for crimes against humanity. The message included evidence of his involvement in the attack on the Harmony. It also included a warning. Humanity was coming for all of them. Admiral Threxnell dismissed the threat with contempt. Humans were insects. Their single successful raid meant nothing. He ordered increased patrols throughout Krethvar space and waited for the pests to show themselves again. He did not have to wait long. The human fleet moved like ghosts through enemy territory. Their new engines allowed them to jump from system to system faster than any species thought possible. They appeared without warning, struck with precision, and disappeared before defenders could respond. Admiral Vasquez planned each operation personally. She studied her targets with obsessive detail. She knew their patrol schedules, their defensive positions, their communication protocols. Human intelligence operatives had done their work well. The Krethvar had no secrets left. The second target was a shipyard where 2 of the massacre vessels were being repaired. Captain Sharma led a strike team that disabled the station's defenses in under 4 minutes. They captured Vice Admiral Corthan as he tried to flee in an escape shuttle. More strikes followed in quick succession. Military bases fell silent. Warships were disabled and boarded. Officers vanished from their commands. Each time, the humans took only their designated targets. Each time, they left everyone else unharmed. This precision terrified the Krethver more than destruction would have. An enemy who burned everything was predictable. An enemy who could reach into your most secure facilities and take exactly what they wanted was something else entirely. The Krethver tried to adapt, move their remaining target officers to heavily defended locations. They tripled their patrols. They hired mercenaries and asked allies for support. None of it mattered. Admiral Vasquez found them anyway. Fleet appeared at a secret military complex buried deep in an asteroid field. The Krethver had hidden 6 of their wanted officers there, protected by 20 warships and layers of defensive systems. The battle lasted less than an hour. Human ships danced through enemy formations with impossible speed. Their weapons struck weak points that should have been hidden. When the fighting ended, 14 Krethver vessels drifted powerless in space. 6 more had surrendered rather than face destruction. The human marines boarded the complex with practiced efficiency. They moved through corridors filled with enemy soldiers, using stun weapons rather than lethal force. They found their targets hiding in a reinforced bunker and dragged them. Out in restraints, not a single Krethver civilian was harmed. Not a single non-combatant died. The humans were brutal in their efficiency, but precise in their mercy. Contradiction drove the Krethvar High Command to desperation. They tried to use civilians as shields, placing wanted officers in population centers. Human intelligence discovered the plan immediately. Strike teams extracted their targets from crowded cities without firing a single shot that endangered innocent lives. Admiral Threxnell watched his command structure crumble around him. Officer after officer disappeared into human custody. His fleet was being dismantled piece by piece. And still the humans came. He gathered his remaining loyal ships and fled to a remote system, hoping distance would provide safety. For 3 weeks he believed he had escaped. Then human vessels appeared on his sensors. The January led the attack. Admiral Vasquez commanding from her bridge with cold focus. Krethver fought desperately, but they were outmatched in every way. Human weapons tore through their shields. Human pilots outmaneuvered their best crews. Human determination overwhelmed their will to resist. When his flagship was finally disabled, Threxnell found himself alone on a darkened bridge. His crew had surrendered or fled. His weapons were silent. His engines were dead. He watched through a cracked viewport as a human shuttle approached. Admiral Vasquez stepped onto the Krethvar bridge, surrounded by armed marines. She walked slowly, her boots echoing in the silence. Threxnell stood to face her, trying to maintain some dignity despite his defeat. He demanded to be treated as a prisoner of war. He invoked ancient Concord laws that required honorable treatment of captured officers. He spoke of conventions and protocols that civilized species were bound to follow. Vasquez listened without expression. When he finished, she pulled a small device from her pocket and activated it. A holographic display appeared in the air between them. Showing a long list of names, she began to read aloud. Ambassador Thomas Okonkwo. Adaze Okonkwo, age 7. Maria Okonkwo. Captain Marcus Chen. Dr. James Wright. Sarah Mitchell. Teacher. David Park. Age 4. Emma Johansson. Age 12. Name after name filled the silent bridge. 12,000 names, each one spoken with careful precision. Threxnell shifted uncomfortably as the list continued. Minutes passed, then an hour. Still she read. The Krethver Admiral finally understood. These were not statistics to humans. These were not acceptable losses in a political calculation. Each name represented a person who had lived and dreamed and loved. Each name was a wound that would never heal. When Vasquez finished, she looked at Threxnell with eyes that held no mercy and no hatred. Only cold, absolute certainty. The alien tried once more to invoke his rights under galactic law. He asked if humanity had any compassion. Admiral Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. It carried the weight of 12,000 deaths, 6 months of grief. and the transformation of a peaceful woman into something far more dangerous. She asked him a question in return, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the ruined bridge. She asked where his compassion had been when escape pods full of children begged for mercy. She asked if he had shown compassion when he ordered his gunners to fire on civilians. She asked if the crew members, who laughed while destroying families, deserved the compassion they had denied their victims. Then she spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Show compassion? That ship died with our civilians. She turned and walked away. Her Marines secured Threxnel in restraints and escorted him to the shuttle. Behind them, the broken Krethvar fleet drifted in silence. The hunt was over. Justice was about to begin. End of Part 4. Show compassion. The human admiral smiled. That ship died with our civilians. Part 5. The trial of Admiral Threxnel and 18 other Krethvar officers took place on Earth. In a specially built courtroom that could accommodate observers from across the galaxy. Millions watched through broadcast systems as humanity demonstrated something the Concord had never witnessed. The accused were given legal representation. Krethvar attorneys traveled to Earth to defend their officers. Human lawyers who believed in the principle of fair trials volunteered to assist. Every accused individual was allowed to speak in their own defense. Every piece of evidence was examined openly. Every procedure followed established law. Neutral observers from 12 different species sat in judgment alongside human officials. The Valois sent their most respected legal scholars. Even former critics of humanity requested permission to watch the proceedings. What they saw shocked them. The evidence against the accused was overwhelming. Communication records showed the massacre was planned months in advance. Orders traced directly from Threxnel to the gunners who destroyed escape pods. Video captured from Krethvar systems showed officers celebrating as civilians died. Yet the humans did not demand death. They did not torture confessions from the accused. They did not parade the prisoners through crowds calling for blood. They simply presented the truth and asked the tribunal to judge. Admiral Threxnel testified in his own defense. He claimed he was following orders from higher authorities. He argued that humans were a threat to galactic stability and that the attack was a necessary action. He showed no remorse for what he had done. The tribunal found all 19 defendants guilty of crimes against sentient life. The sentence was life imprisonment without possibility of release. They would spend their remaining years in a facility built specifically for them, treated humanely, but never allowed to return to their people. Many in the galaxy expected humanity to secretly execute the prisoners. Once attention faded, they waited for news of accidents or escape attempts that ended in death. That news never came. Years passed, and the Krethvar prisoners remained alive. They received medical care when they were sick. They were allowed to communicate with their families. They lived in conditions that met every standard required by galactic law. This was perhaps the most terrifying thing humanity had done. The Krethvar government faced impossible questions from their own people. How had humans, supposedly primitive and weak, defeated their military so completely? How had these newcomers demonstrated a level of moral authority that made the ancient Concord look corrupt by comparison? How could their officers receive justice from the species they had tried to destroy? Political changes swept through Krethvar's space. The leaders who had authorized the massacre were removed from power. New governments formed around the promise of peace and cooperation. The rogue faction lie was abandoned as the truth became undeniable. Humanity did not demand these changes. They happened because the galaxy had seen something new. They happened because beings across 1,000 worlds asked themselves what humans were made of. Admiral Kira Vasquez returned to Earth after the trials concluded. She had been offered promotions, positions of power, titles that would have made her the most important human in the galaxy. She refused them all. Instead, she traveled to Luna, where the memorial had been completed. 12,000 names in granite surrounded a preserved section of the Harmony's hull. The metal was scarred and blackened from the attack, a permanent reminder of what had been lost. She walked through the memorial alone, reading names she had memorized long ago. Ambassador Okonkwo, Little a days. Captain Chen, the children who had dreamed of meeting aliens, the families who had believed in peace. She found Captain Priya Sharma standing before a particular section of wall. The younger woman had her own names to mourn: friends from the academy, crew members she had served with, a cousin who had joined the Harmony as a junior engineer. They stood together in silence for a long time. Sharma finally spoke. She asked if Vasquez felt that justice had been served. She asked if the trials and the punishment were enough to balance 12,000 deaths. Vasquez considered the question carefully before answering. Justice was never about balance, she said. No punishment could bring back the dead. No verdict could heal the grief of those left behind. Justice was about something else entirely. It was about showing the galaxy who humans really were. Other species had expected revenge. They had waited for humanity to become monsters, to prove that the Krethver had been right to fear them. Instead, humans had demonstrated something that ancient civilizations had forgotten was possible. They had shown that strength and mercy could exist together. They had proven that grief did not require cruelty. They had built monuments to remember their dead, while building courtrooms to judge their enemies fairly. A message arrived on Vasquez's communicator. The Concord had received formal requests from 3 different species, asking humanity to mediate their long-standing disputes. Ancient conflicts that had resisted resolution for centuries were being presented to the newcomers whose justice had impressed the galaxy. Sharma read the message with wide eyes. She asked if humans were really qualified to solve problems that older species could not. Vasquez smiled for the first time in what felt like years. It was not the cold smile she had shown Threxnel. It was something warmer, something that remembered what hope felt like. She said that qualification had nothing to do with age or experience. What mattered was having principles worth believing in and the courage to defend them. Humans were young among the stars. They had already shown they would not abandon what made them human. They left the memorial together, walking through gardens that human hands had planted around the granite walls. Flowers from every continent on Earth grew there, along with plants from Mars and the outer colonies. Life surrounded the names of the dead, a promise that their sacrifice had meaning. Behind them, the Harmony's hull gleamed in the light of the sun. Ahead of them, a galaxy waited to see what humanity would become. The massacre had been meant to destroy human ambition. Instead, it had forged something stronger than anyone imagined. A species that remembered every name. A civilization that chose justice over revenge. A people who refused to lose their humanity even in the darkest hours. The Krethver tried to teach humans that the galaxy was cruel and that only cruelty could survive. Humanity had taught a different lesson. They had shown that compassion was not weakness. They had proven that mercy required more strength than violence. They had demonstrated that the measure of a civilization was not how it treated its friends, but how it treated its enemies. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. End of Part 5.